Susan, your shtick, can you explain to everybody here how you got to doing what you're doing? And then we'll start talking a little bit more about the golden idea.
Sure. And thank you, Anna, for hosting this and inviting me to come and share my information, because you know how passionate I feel that people are messengers and they have information that they want to get out into the world. And sometimes it's not so easy. Sometimes we spin in circles. But what happened for me is that I lost both my husband and my mother at very young ages. I was young, my husband was young, my mother was young, and everything happened within the span of less than 1 year from diagnosis to the passing. And I lived in small town Pennsylvania, and everybody knew me. I was the young widow. And while I loved the sincere compassion that people felt for me, I felt like I was in one big pity party. And I wanted to go out and live my life as me and not as what I had experienced. So I moved from small town Pennsylvania all the way across the United States to San Diego, California. Didn't know anybody, wanted to go someplace where it was warm and I didn't have to dig snow out of the driveway anymore. And I also wanted to establish residency where I could go to college. Now, full disclosure, life took on a whole new life, my life, and I never did go to college. I never made it there because I fell into a career that was up and coming. It was selling computers. We were talking about computers earlier. It was selling computers when nobody knew what a desktop computer was. So I was really in the perfect place at the perfect time, to the point that I built an organization for entrepreneurs until AT&T recruited me. And AT&T recruited me as their national data sales organization leader to work in liaison with their computer salespeople that were selling the big voice computers. The people I had been working with said, Susan, we understand why you're doing this, because you're being brought in at an executive level and you kind of feel like you've arrived. But they said, you're an entrepreneur and you'll always have a job with us because you're going to want to come back to us again. And they were absolutely right. I was not cut out for that life. I felt like somebody clipped my wings for the very entrepreneurial spirit they brought me in for. I had no latitude and I needed to work within a very strict structure. I knew I needed to leave, but I didn't want to go backwards. I didn't want to go back to what I had been doing. So I did something entirely new. I started a bakery and cafe in San Diego. I'd never done any of that, never waitressed, brand new. It became highly successful. I had 5 locations in 3 years. Then I got to the point where it was too much and I wanted to downsize, and I got it to a very manageable level. And then I had all this extra time. So I started writing, because people would come to me and say, how did you do that? How did you create these successes coming from not an educated background, not from having experience in a particular industry? You just kind of got plopped in and you survived. And I didn't have an answer for them. So I went to the Awakened World Conference in 1999 that was in Palm Springs. And it was a wonderful Dr. Michael Beckwith from the Agape Church and Gene Houston. And I don't know this, it was a small group, I think maybe 100 people, but the energy level, their frequency level was so high that when I got in my car and started that 2-hour drive back home to San Diego from Palm Springs, I had all these ideas rolling around in my head. By the time I got home, I had 2 little Yorkies that had been taken care of by the next door neighbor, and I retrieved them back home and then brought out a notepad and just wrote down what these ideas were, because I didn't want to lose them. You know how you do that? You get these golden ideas and then they're gone. So I wrote it down, put the notepad down, and came back to play with my little dogs. The next morning, I got up and I read what I'd written, and I just wasn't sure. Is this like an outline? What am I going to do with this? And I faxed it. Now that tells you how long ago that was, because we weren't using email. So I faxed it to a friend who called me and said, where did you get this? And he was crying. Mm. So that became my gift book, which I self-published, called The Land of I Can, where it asks what, not how, not when, just what is your greatest dream. To take one step, and that the power is in the knowing. Now that again happened kind of like I started selling computers. I didn't have a computer background. I started a cafe. I didn't have a restaurant background. Now I've written and published this book that is super successful. And I've got authors coming to me saying, can you help me? How did you do this? And I had to kind of really reverse engineer what had happened. And I realized that mining for gold, like our golden idea is inside of us and it's unique to every one of us. But sometimes we can't see it. We're in the busyness of the day, or when we're in our heads and we're trying to think it out analytically. But when we're in that space of creativity, it unearths. Now, when I'm taking someone through a group coaching program, I don't do very much one-on-one anymore because I want to help more and more people. So it's gone into group coaching. I can see in them what they can't see for themselves, because sometimes we're too close to it because it is a part of who we are. So we just keep chipping away and getting to what's really the gold, the golden idea that lives in each and every one of us.
What you're saying, we keep chipping away, we have to keep chipping away. You've reverse engineered this process. So how do we start? What do we start looking at? How do we begin?
Well, clarity is the most important thing. Getting clarity on why do you want to write this book? Is it a creative outlet for you? Or is it part of the business that you're working on? Is it a mission that you have in the world that you want to get the word out? But you have to think, why are you writing this book? What's that's very strategic, because I'm considered a strategist, digital strategist and a marketing strategist, but you have to start with kind of the end in mind. Mm-hmm. And so when we identify the problem that our market has, that the people we want to reach have, which was, for me, people kept saying, how did you do this? How did you keep creating the successes? And what came to me after many attempts of trying to write it, from just exercising the muscle of writing but not getting anywhere, it just came to me because I realized it was asking what. And so your first question is what? What is it that you want to do with writing a book? What is the problem that you solve? You identify the solution for that problem, and then why are you the one to be writing the book? Because it's so important that you, as an individual, your life stories, your life's up and downs, your successes and your failures. This is how we learn. We've learned by story over the eons. So we have, as individuals, have to be in there. And sometimes I find people, when I'm working with them, that they're hiding behind the content.
Ooh, talk about that, please.
Yeah, so it's not, when we write, especially our first book, we're not putting everything we ever knew in life in that one book. You have a copy of The Land of I Can. It's a very simple book. I used children's books because I love children's books and I collect children's books. And I wrote a children's book for a client just recently, but they're very distilled and very simple. And so there's nothing in The Land of I Can that teaches you how to start a business or how to write a book or do social media. There's no tactic in here. It's very much, it's a book that helps people move from being unstuck to get them unstuck. Mm-hmm. So the first part of it is we don't want to get loaded down in content, like everything that you've ever learned and you want to share. Identify that one idea. Now, I can tell you that sometimes people identify an idea and it shifts once it's been identified. But if we don't put our stake in the ground, if we don't say, this is the problem that I want to sell, that this is the one that I want to get out into the world, then you're going to spin in circles. That's just the way it works. And if you go with content only and just business stuff, even though you may be the best person that ever opened a coffee shop in the world, if it's just stuff and there's nothing humanistic in it, people will read the first couple chapters and put it down. And the most important thing when you're writing a book is you want people to consume it. You want people to get from the beginning to the end and then tell their friends and family about it. And that's how a book grows.
And, I think it is worth stating right here, these principles apply across whatever you're doing, writing a book, starting a business, bringing a product out, anything that you're looking to create. Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely. When I started my coffee shops, nobody knew who Starbucks was. Starbucks was located in Seattle, which is where I live now, but nobody knew about Starbucks. But I was fascinated with it. And I'd become very fascinated with espresso traveling through Europe. But people were just used to regular coffee in San Diego. So I started doing flavored coffees and the syrups. And yes, I had a beautiful espresso machine that sometimes people would get a cappuccino or an espresso, but it wasn't common. It wasn't common, certainly not a latte. So I would fly up to Seattle to look at what was Starbucks doing and what was Seattle's coffee company doing with all their kiosks, because that's how I started to expand my business. So I studied what they were doing and then applied that. But I didn't go into tea. I didn't go into soft drinks. It was whatever other consumables are. Were they available in the cafe? Yes, but it wasn't what I put my stake in the ground for, what I wanted to be known for. My company was called Little Miss Muffins because we baked fresh muffins. And I had calorie counts and nutritional counts. And yes, that was before anybody was doing that. I would get in an elevator sometimes and people would turn, they'd look at me and they'd say, "You're Little Miss Muffins, right?" "Yeah, I'm Little Miss Muffins."
I'm going to call you that now. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, people to this day call me Miss Muffins. But it was the stake in the ground. I didn't do anything other than the coffee and the muffins. And when I launched The Land of I Can, and it went into so many different lands of life, one of the people that interviewed me for Success Magazine circled back and contacted me when the Idiot's Guide company, publishing company, had contacted she and her husband to just do research and write a book on opening and running a coffee bar. But she remembered me and she said, "Would you come in as a co-author? Because we can study it, but we want the inside scoop. We've never had a coffee shop." So that's how I became the co-author of the Idiot's Guide on how to open and run a coffee bar, because it came from the PR that I was doing. And I would identify myself. I'm the owner, of Cafe in the Park and Little Miss Muffins and so on. So yes, it doesn't matter whether it's a coffee shop or whether you're writing a book. You have to stay on topic. You have to stay on what is that golden idea, and don't worry that you have more in you than that one golden idea, because that will be book 2 and then book 3.
So what about for people like me? And we were talking about this last week. I basically went through, we'll call it word vomit, just barfing ideas out on a page until it came to a point where I realized, oh yeah, there's a theme to this. Is there a better way to approach this for people who are looking at trying to figure out their golden idea?
Well, you did, in all honesty, what I did before The Land of I Can. When people were asking me, how did you do this? You need to write a book. I'm sure that you've had people tell you, I know I've told you that you need to write a book, but many of us are told you should write a book. And I would sit down and try to write like, okay, is this an autobiographical? Am I writing this as a fiction story, which I want to state, I don't currently work with teaching people and coaching people on fiction books. I'm very entrepreneurial around it, building a business and this doing something for you. But at the time I didn't know, and I was bouncing all over the place. And again, this is like late 1990s. People like me didn't write books. If you weren't a celebrity, if you weren't the founder of a $5 million company or more, people like me weren't writing books, and I was getting stuck. However, I was exercising the writing muscle. I was all over the place, but I was exercising my writing muscle. And I think that's why when I was then put in the environment that I was at the Awakened World Conference, then the information dropped in. And I will tell you that the children's book that I wrote for my client, that also was dropped in information. It happened when I was walking, because Anne, I do a lot of walking. And when I was walking, I was getting ideas. Like, my imagination is very open when I'm in nature and I'm walking, and I feel really connected to the earth and to the world and to the universe. Then ideas start dropping in. And I always make sure I've got my phone and I can record that information. And it was that drop in information that gave me the characters and gave me the storyline for the children's book. So it doesn't matter whether it's a business book or a gift book or a children's book. Fiction, quite frankly, has a lot more structure to it, because the arc, you really have developed the arc and the whole hero's journey. But in all honesty, all books have that, because you want to have them to keep consuming. There's a term, and I may be getting too deep on this first masterclass on this, but there's a term called open loops. It's what Netflix does with their series. And anytime it's a multiple episode program, there's always an open loop at the end of episode 1 that leaves an unanswered question that your audience is asking in their head. And then you answer that question in chapter 2 or episode 2. And then at the end of chapter 2 or episode 2, then there's the open question that makes you want to go to chapter 3. And that's that consumability. We need to make sure that all books are being consumed, or we haven't really achieved our reason for it. Because again, we have identified the problem that our people who we want to speak to have. We've identified the solution for them, one solution, not 100 solutions, one golden idea solution, and then bring ourselves into it as to why we're the ones that are called upon to write the book.
Which leads us into imposter syndrome, which we do not have time for today, but we will address because that's a huge one. So would it be fair to say that to help you unearth your golden idea, look out there and see what problems you're passionate about solving, start practicing whatever it is, writing down what it is you feel the solutions are. Put yourself in situations where you are connected so that you can receive the downloads that are coming to you, the creativity that you need to get there. Create humanity in whatever it is you're doing so that it's connected. It's not just a tactic. And then what would the final step be? Walk forward with...
Well, when you get to the point that you have the idea that you are going to take action upon, then the process, which I think we're going to be talking about in future master classes, is creating the outline and getting started with it. But what a lot of people do is they just sit down and they just keep writing and they just keep exercising. And they don't say, I'm going to pick this one idea. And there was a question that was dropped into the chat about someone who is passionate about solving a problem. I didn't see who that was. I think Rachel might have dropped that in. But in any event, yes, if you are passionate about solving a problem, that is the first step. And then if you're passionate about solving that problem, then what is the solution that you have to offer to that problem? And then why are you the one that's the messenger to be able to deliver that? Now I do have a quiz, and Anna has taken the quiz. And if you
Okay.
go to booktypequiz.com, I've identified 4 different types because I love avatars and archetypes. I've identified 4 different types of people that when you know what type of person you are, it helps to guide what type of book you should write.
It was surprisingly accurate, I found, based on what I've already been.
Yeah, it took me a year, and we really worked on it to fine tune it. And I knew when I took it that it nailed who I am. Other people, I'd say, well, how does it feel? Does that feel like you? And they said, yes. So there's a lot of information. You get a pretty hefty report on what it is that you bring to the table and what the stopping blocks are, because everybody has them. Everybody has them. And the biggest one is one that you just brought up, Anna, is you start writing. And I already brought up that I went through that. Who am I? Who am I to write this book?
Yeah.
Why would anybody want to read a book written by me?
On that note, there is a question that was asked earlier by Kyla, which I'm wondering if you would mind answering before we wrap up. And it is, she says, I've always wanted to share. However, I often fear I might overshare or my message might be taken the wrong way or misunderstood in a book or on stage.
I think you need to take the book type quiz, because I suspect which category, which of the 4 you are in. And I think you will get some great information there. And that is, number 1, when you're sharing, let's say somebody has had a very abusive background. You don't want to share when you're still in the pain. You want to have grown from that and be able to look back and see those nuggets, see the golden ideas, what you can share coming out of it. And when you do it from that standpoint, the chances of you oversharing minimizes, because you're looking for, what did I learn that I can help other people with, rather than just sharing the goo with everybody. You have to share enough, but not too much. And what was the second part of it? Oh, being out where people would be offended or
Misunderstand, misinterpret.
And you know what? That's going to happen. That's going to happen. If you go to Amazon and you look at The Land of I Can, there is a review that has been there almost from the very beginning. And when you read the review, it's the only 1-star review. That 1-star review doesn't even talk about the book. It became very obvious to me. I used to do these talks at the Barnes & Noble about create the life of your dreams. They invited me in for one because I was a local author, and then we kept doing them. And there was a man there who was showing interest in me personally, and I wasn't reciprocating. And when I read that review, I thought, that's who that is, because he took it as a personal attack on me, without, it had nothing to do with the book. And that has lived there with The Land of I Can. And Amazon doesn't review it. That person has never reviewed another book. It's the only review he's ever placed there. But I consider that my badge of courage. I consider that my lioness, to say, I'm still here with this message, no matter what's been publicly placed on something that is coming from my heart. So you do have to have the courage to just let it roll off your back. And it's not easy, but it comes down to how important is it that you get the message out.
And I know, Susan, you and I have talked about this. I talk about this with a lot of my authors, the importance of support and getting in with a group of people who are going through a similar experience, who are putting themselves out there, who are at the level of public acknowledgement that they are receiving the negative feedback, because that's part of the journey. It's going to happen. Someone's going to tell you you're full of shit and you don't know it's just part of the thing. But when you're surrounded by other people who are also receiving feedback, as we'll call it,
yes,
it does make it more part of the journey and less part of a terrible part of you that, you're inefficient or inadequate or whatever.
And I think if you go into it knowing, I'm going to go into it knowing that somebody might say something that is inappropriate or is hurtful to me, but I'm still going to stay on my mission. I'm going to still stay on my track, because what I want to do out in the world is more important than what that small person had to say.
And it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Yeah.
So, eyes wide open. Susan, as always, what an honor to be with you.
Oh, it's a joy. It's a joy to be here with you, Anna, and for the people who are attending, and for those messengers in the world who have something to say.
Amazing. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon.